What's up, Dardis, and good morning. This is a very fun episode I have on Jonathan Tjarks from The Ringer to talk about the trade deadline and what young players in the league, rookie contracts and the like, uh, teams might want to target that might be available because, their current team is sort of suppressing their role. Just a fun sort of dart-centric look at the deadline. But that was recorded before news of this Caris Levert deal broke. And so I wanted to do a quick reaction to that before I pitch to the normal episodes. I'm going to do that right now. So Caris Levert goes from the Indiana Pacers to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Ricky Rubio's expiring. A lotto protected first round pick this year, the Houston Rockets second round pick this year, which is basically a late first. It'll be, number 33 or 34 or 35. And then another second in exchange for another future second in exchange for the Miami Heat's second in this year's draft. So the Pacers move up in the second round this year, gain another first this year in the back half of the first round, and then gain a second, and they give up Caris Levert. So, this trade is interesting because I think Caris is low-key kind of a polarizing player. If not among NBA executives, then among, the people who cover the league. And I thought, first of all, that the Pacers did fine in this trade. I thought they did, to move up and get an extra pick for Caris, especially if Caris doesn't figure into your long-term plans. I think that's fine. And I think that it's pretty clear the report had come out that they were looking for 2 first-round picks, and so this is basically as close as they were going to get to that. Maybe they had this deal in their back pocket, and they were just trying to see if anyone else wanted to throw anything else in. They got a deal in which Caris's contract was treated as a positive asset, and they got some draft compensation. I have my concerns that the Pacers with Rick Carlisle there and always wanting to compete are going to actually draft and develop those guys, but it gives them extra ammo for another deal if they want. So it's good for them. The Caris half of it is much more interesting to me, because Caris has had a very strange career. He started his career out on the Brooklyn Nets, but it was still in the desert version of the Nets where they didn't have any assets and they were still rebounding from the Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett trades where they gave up all those picks and swaps to the Celtics. And he started to develop, and when D'Angelo Russell was there and they made the playoffs, I think as a 7 seed in maybe 2019. And then Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant come to town, but Durant's out 2019, 2020 with his Achilles that he suffered in the 2019 finals. So you have the Nets with Kyrie, who then I think missed half that year with an injury, and Levert's on that team. And I believe the end of that season was the bubble, and he had some very notable scoring performances in the bubble. But then he has this giant health scare with his kidneys, which is legitimately life-threatening. Gets over that, thank goodness. Goes to the Pacers, and last year the Pacers, which is his first season with the Pacers, they have Nate Bjorkgren, which is a fiasco as a first-year head coach. So that team is entirely in disarray. And then this year they have Rick Carlisle, but they have a bunch of injuries, and that team never quite gets going. And now they're pivoting away. So you could make the argument that Caris has never really had a truly stable, good team to play on. And the reason I lead off my little reaction with that is because I think that Caris has a reputation as a sort of high volume, but maybe inefficient counting stats kind of guy. And if you look at his percentages, you would have some evidence for that because, he's been in the league. So I think this is his 6th season. And his free throw percentage over that time is, about 74%. Though last year was his highest year, was 81. It's back down to 76 now. And his 3-point percentage has never gone really above 36 or so. And for his career is 33. So 33% from three and 74% from the line. And he's an offensively tilted player, In 2020, 2021, he got up to 20 points a game. He's at 19 points a game now. And at 6'7", attacking from the wing, his game is all about getting into the paint off the dribble and getting buckets and finishing. And so, if you see those numbers, which are not the most efficient in terms of the ball going in, you would say, well, this guy's just sort of soaking up possessions and he's taking it away from more efficient offensive guys. And that is going to cost his team. And for the Cavs to acquire that guy means that maybe they are misvaluing him because he's going to be taking possessions away from Darius Garland or whomever else on that team who you'd rather see possessions end up with, and that it's not going to work out for them, especially because he has, I believe, another year on his contract at, I think, 18 million, 17 million around there. But he's also extension eligible this summer. And if y'all have listened to previous episodes, you know that I talked about Cam Reddish sort of in this capacity and how I did not love that trade from the Knicks' perspective in terms of developing Cam, because his contract is going to be up for an extension, and I believe that the Knicks would extend him. And I just don't think that there's really a path for Cam to succeed in New York, at least not in the way that Cam sees himself as this bucket getter. I am much more optimistic about Caris in Cleveland, and the main reason why is that, number one, I think Caris is a better player than Cam. And number two, I think that Cleveland has a much better infrastructure for a bucket getter than New York does. And I won't make this about New York and Cam Reddish since that's its own episode. But Caris is very, very good at getting into the lane and finishing and getting, he has a very a rhythmic, herky-jerky game, lots of hesitation dribbles, sort of like a poor man's, Shea Gilgeous kind of bag. And the best way I can describe it from reviewing the tape that I have is that he doesn't really execute the offense. If you have a set offense where there are these reads at this time and these are your responsibilities when you catch the ball, then Caris is not going to be great at doing that, which might explain why he fell out of favor in Indiana, or why Indiana was willing to trade him, because Carlisle very much is that kind of regimented way. But he is very adept at sort of just playing action reaction with the defense. If a defender leans one way or gives him a certain lane, then he's going to take it, and he's constantly trying to put his defender off balance to get himself looks, and he does get himself looks. It's just that because he likes going into the lane, a lot of the time his finishes are contested, and so they are naturally going to be a little less efficient. However, and this is something that Sam Vecini mentioned in an article that he wrote this morning for The Athletic, Caris showed a bit more this season in passing out of ball screens. And what I saw when I watched him is that because Caris is he's so improvisational with the ball, that frequently the pick and roll partner that he's with doesn't know when to expect the ball. That's really the issue, because Caris doesn't quite know what angle he's going to try to finish at, or if he's going to pass or try to dump it off or hit a lob or kick out. He doesn't know until the last possible second. And so the potential recipient of that pass is often a step slow in reacting when the ball does come to him. And that can lead to some inaccurate passes or some deflections or some turnovers. Now, that is still a problem, but it also means that if Caris goes to an environment that has really, really good natural pick and roll finishers, guys who can adjust to sort of slightly mistimed or slightly inaccurate passes, then I think that they can clean some of that up. And that's what Cleveland has, because they have Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, who are probably in terms of a combination, the very best front court at finishing pick and rolls in the league. Now, it's early. I'm recording this early in the morning, so if I'm leaving someone off that's much better at that, then I apologize. But I think that they will be able to cover for that a little. And even this year, with as rough as it's been for the Pacers, when Caris is on the floor with other starters, the Pacers have a positive point differential. When he is on the court with Malcolm Brogdon, the Pacers are positive. When he's on the court with Miles Turner, the Pacers are positive. When he's on the court with Sabonis, they're slightly negative. They're close to even. But I think that might have to do with sort of how Sabonis acts as a sole five on defense. So, the Cavs have the playoffs in mind with this trade. And anytime you sacrifice draft assets for a player, you want them to be able to play for you in the playoffs. And Caris is not a great defender, especially since he's had a couple injuries, though he's 27 now and in his prime now. But he's 6'7", and he does not tank any of the defenses that he is on. Again, in mentioning the Pacers this year, the fact that they're positive with him on the court with other starters doesn't mean that he's really dragging lineups down. And at a certain point, that's all you really want from guards and wings. You want guys who are not going to be hunted. And at 6'7", Caris is not really going to be hunted in the playoffs. He's not going to be the weakest defender on the floor. And while that sounds like sort of a backhanded compliment, it really isn't. It is very hard to get to a point where in a playoff series, the other team is not going to hunt you. I mean, that means that you have real, true value. And Caris's ability to get into the paint, at least to get into the paint, maybe not quite finishing, maybe that gets tougher as the playoffs go on. And maybe those inaccurate passes start to creep up on him more as the playoffs go on. But as far as creating that initial advantage where a defense has to pay attention to him and maybe sends a little bit of help, that should be there in round 2, round 3. If the Cavs were to make a run to the finals, it'll be there too. Caris has that. He, in his most recent game before he got traded, he had 42 and I think 8 assists or something like that. And in his last 15 games before he got traded, he was averaging over 22 a night. That's the difference between him and a guy like Reddish, is that he, even though it might seem like he's he's inefficient, and there is evidence, his offensive juice is real. And I believe that it will be, I think it will be showcased in a positive way in Cleveland, whether they put him in the starting lineup or the closing lineup, or whether he's just sort of instant offense when Darius Garland isn't on the floor. It's well documented how that team really falls apart offensively when Garland's not on the floor because they've been giving Rondo all these minutes. I just think that Caris is a decent, I think he's a good antidote for that. I compared him to Jordan Clarkson, who's another polarizing guy, on Twitter, when I first, reacted to the trade. And, Clarkson was sixth man of the year, and some people scoff at that, but he had a positive impact on the Jazz for at least a couple of years that he's been there. And Clarkson is 6'4". He can be targeted on defense in the playoffs, and Caris is 6'7". I think it is a very worthwhile thing for the Cavs to have done. And as far as this draft goes, like I mentioned, they're giving up their first and then they're moving back in the second round. This draft, I think, is pretty flat from pick 20 on. And if they do their homework, if they want to draft someone else to grow with this young core, I think even at 50, they can do that. But that's another story for another episode. So that was my reaction. And now let's go to the regularly scheduled episode with Jonathan Tjarks of The Ringer. Thanks, guys.